thought that I would be the one. Rhyner, sports talk. Baseball, 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 baseball.
Oh, with the big mic. Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Okay, now I get it.
We got a lightning strike, boys. What happened over there, Grego? We had a little lightning strike right outside the window.
The Texas Rangers win the World Series.
All right. Here's a tip for all these Americano League teams.
Wait, you said tip?
Yeah, tip.
Okay.
With a P.
Keep jamming.
The ticket, colon, nothing but a big Gen X jerk-off session.
Is this a cool night or what?
Although somebody would hear that and go, bullshit.
I'm back, bitches.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you may be consuming this, however you may be consuming this, you have landed on another episode of Your Dark Companion. It is the 16th of October. I would be Mike Rhyner. We are all here inside the nurturing bosom of the mothership, ready to rock and roll with a very, very special guest today. We have Shoopy, Ashley, Mickey, everybody here. But today's guest is a guy who I think you're going to enjoy, mainly because I enjoy him. And around here, that's criteria number one. If you're going to get on Your Dark Companion, you got to be somebody I'm into. And I'm very, very much into this fellow that we have on today. First of all, I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I love the Rangers. And the guy that we've got on today loves the Rangers too. Maybe even more than me, maybe more than anybody. He is the guy who tells you in a way that only he can what is going on during a game in Rangers baseball. If you're there inside the stadium, you know, they don't pipe in radio broadcast or anything like that. That hasn't started as of yet. But what they do have is the PA guy. Now, I've always been really curious about PA guys ever since I was a kid. When I first started going to Dallas-Fort Worth Rangers baseball at Burnett Field over in Oak Cliff, hard by the Trinity River, one of the things that I was most eaten up with as a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old was that somewhere up there in that press box, which was suspended from that flimsy ceiling up there, somewhere in there was a guy on the microphone, and he was the guy who was telling us what was going on, who all the players were. When there was a pitching change, he would say, now pitching for the Rangers, number 7, you know.
Just like that.
Just like that. And I was very, very curious about him. So much so that, you know, by then I was watching baseball on TV and everything, and I would always listen in the background to the various PA announcers, and a lot of them didn't sound anything like anything I'd ever heard before. Well, when you go out to the Globe and the Temple before that, and Arlington Stadium before that in recent years, we'll find out exactly how many here in just a second, but the man at the helm of the PA out there is the great Chuck Morgan.
Yes.
He is as emblematic of Rangers baseball as anybody or anything because he's been at it a long time. And we have him on Your Dark Companion today, and we're going to get to know the man a little bit. We've known each other for a long time, but opportunities for us to sit down and really have a nice conversation are almost non-existent. But today we can do that, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it because with the way you just described things, you and I grew up at a similar time of era,
more or less.
And I was infatuated with the PA guy at Busch Stadium 1, or it was actually Sportsman's Park. A guy named Charlie Jones, not the Charlie Jones that did football for NBC, but another Charlie Jones, and That's the first guy I heard. And then, Mike, I would listen to games on the radio and listen to other guys, and even Hawks basketball back in the day, St. Louis Hawks. And I could hear David Zinkoff of the Philadelphia 76ers, basket by Hal Greer, which was where Rusty Greer comes from.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, I'm the same way. I was infatuated with that stuff.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I never, ever get to talk to anybody about. But late at night, back then, I would lay in my bed and I'd have my transistor radio on. And I would be flipping by stations. And, you know, back then, you could pick up a pretty good number of stations from other ports of call. And I, too, would listen to St. Louis Hawks basketball. And I liked basketball, but the NBA was virtually non-existent. You know, now we did have it. There's a myth out there that we didn't see the NBA on TV back in the days of Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell and those Celtics teams and Bob Pettit and all those guys. That is not true. On Saturday and Sunday, Channel 5 used to show games. I don't know how many people knew what was going on or how many people watched it, but this little 10-year-old sure as hell did. And if you wanted to see Wilt Chamberlain play back then, you could. The myth is out there that, well, he was never on TV. You couldn't see him play. Yeah, he was, too. You just had to look for him a little bit. But, yeah, I used to listen to St. Louis Hawks basketball and all that stuff. But the PA guy in baseball that I first latched onto, and I didn't like him at all because he didn't sound like anybody I ever knew, was, now I see his greatness, the great Bob Shepard.
Bob Shepard.
At Yankee Stadium. And he sounded very northern. He sounded very buttoned down. Every word was carefully enunciated with that New York accent. It was almost like you were listening to a stage actor or something like that. But he was the first guy that I ever gravitated toward.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I could hear him on the Yankee Game of the Week,
yeah,
and hear him in the background. And I finally got to meet him in 1979, second to the last game of the season for the Yankees. The Nashville Sounds, who I did the PA for, became a Yankee affiliate, the AA affiliate, and somehow or other, Mr. Larry Schmittou got me connected with Mr. Steinbrenner, and I got to do the game, the second to the last game of the season in 79 at Yankee Stadium.
Really?
Yeah, and Bob Shepard, he said, do you want me to do the lineups or do you want to do the lineups? And I said, I'll do the lineups. So I did the lineups, and he said, do you think you need me to stick around? I think you've got things under control. He said, I think I'm going to go home and take a nap. I've got a Giants game tomorrow. It was, it was October.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm fine. If you want to stay, you're welcome to stay. And he stayed for a couple innings, and then he left. But very nice man, and it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've seen video, actually, of Chuck doing the Yankees PA announcements. So, yeah, 1978, 1979, there's young Chuck just announcing, Reggie Jackson?
Number 44, Reggie Jackson. And then one of the strange things about it was the second to last game of the season. Yankees were way out of it. Ron Guidry, great pitcher, played center field the last couple of innings.
I didn't know that.
Just doing bits.
You must have been a little bit of a culture change for fans up there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was a little bit different.
I don't mean to cast aspersions on anybody here, but there's a little bit of a difference between the way you sound and the way Bob Shepard sounds.
Yeah, when a Southern Illinois, Middle Tennessee hillbilly comes in, it's a little bit different than Bob Shepard. So, but I did it the way I introduced people to the Opry. I did it the way I introduced Steve Bye-Bye Balboni when he was with the Nashville Sounds, and nobody said anything. Everything was fine. So,
all right, I want to get into all of that.
Okay,
but I want to do it in that organized way that only I can here.
Right.
All right, where are you from exactly?
I'm originally from Marion, Illinois. And it's between, it's about 120 miles southeast of St. Louis. So I grew up a Cardinals fan. But Marion, it's where the federal penitentiary that replaced Alcatraz.
Yes, that's
in
right.
In the 60s. And that's where Pete Rose went to prison. And, my cousin is Ray Fosse. So Ray Fosse grew up in Marion, Illinois. And it's interesting that Pete Rose, who ran over Ray Fosse, ended up going to prison in Ray Fosse's hometown. And, Ray's mother was a cook at my grade school. And in the holiday season, she would bake pies for people at Thanksgiving or Christmas. And great pies, outstanding. And the story goes that when Pete Rose left the federal penitentiary in Marion, he went by Ray's mom's house and got a pie.
Is that true?
That's for everything I know. Ray told me it was true, so I'm going to trust Ray that it was true.
Now, for those who may not remember, Ray Fosse was a catcher with the Indians in the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, early 70s.
Yeah. And in one of the most brutal, awful collisions that we've ever had in baseball that I know of anyway, at home plate, Ray Fosse was waiting to catch a throw. Pete Rose was rounding third base, and it was obvious that there was going to be a pretty heady collision here because, Pete Rose gave no quarter and asked for none. And Ray Fosse was a gamer himself, and his job was to stand in there, catch the ball, and try to tag him out. And Pete Rose just ran over him as hard as he could, and Ray Fosse was, I don't know, some say he was never the same after
Probably
that.
pretty much ruined his career. I mean, he ended up going to Oakland and was catcher for a couple of world championship teams, but after that he pretty much faded. But became a broadcaster and did a good job. So,
how'd you make your way into the radio game?
Mike, I did a PA when I was 14 years old of a Little League game.
Really?
Yeah, and I was a big fan of baseball cards, and a guy needed some help, and he said, "Hey, I had just played in a game," and he said, "Hey, I need you guys. What are you doing now?" I said, "I guess I'm going to go home or go watch a game." And he said, "Well, I'll give you a couple of packs of baseball cards to PA a game." And I thought, wow. Talk on a microphone and free baseball cards. I'm in. So that was the first time I ever did a game, and that became a regular thing. And after doing that for a couple of months, a guy at a radio station, a small country station, wanted to know if I had any interest in doing radio on Sunday nights. So at 15, hillbilly music on Sunday nights on W3D in Marion, Illinois. And that's how I got into radio. And along the way through high school, I did that, made a little extra money, played sports. And at no time through high school did I think I was ever going to do anything like that. I always saw myself either pitching for the Cardinals or playing football for the football Cardinals or something like that. And that came to an end at a practice field at Southern Illinois for football. Man, there's got to be an easier way to do things. And then I thought, well, what about this radio thing? So that's how it happened.
Did you always have those pipes that you have? Because I got to tell you, I've always been so envious. But I'm envious of anybody.
And
that's
see,
got a good
I'm
voice.
like most people. I can't stand to listen to myself. I can't stand that. Anyway, I don't know. People ask me about that, and I'm sure you get the same thing. I have a lot of radio guys that say, "Hey, what do you do for your voice?" I have a lot of problem with my voice, and I attribute to being out in the backyard when I was 5, 6 years old, and whatever season it was, I was playing that sport. Plus, while I was playing with other guys in the neighborhood, I'm doing the play-by-play and the PA, and doing that for 7 or 8 years. See, I think it made the voice strong. So I tell all these guys that have trouble with their voice, hey, get rid of all the stuff. Get rid of the honey. Quit doing that. Smoke some cigars. Sing Motown in the car, and take a shot at Jack Daniels every now and then, and
Yeah,
you'll be
just,
fine.
in other words, just do what you normally do.
That's what Hank Snow told me one time backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. Chuck, my boy, do you ever have any trouble with your voice? And I said, no, not really. He said, well, if you ever do, shot of Jack Daniels takes care of you.
Rangers probably prompted a few of those shots too. But I was going to say, like, it was a funny thing. You know, I got to work with Chuck for a few years with the Rangers, and, you know, obviously anyone can see it, but, you know, most games he's got a big bag of peanuts. He's got a big soda next to him. Like, all the things that probably, you know, any professional voice trainer or actor or whoever would say, like, you should not be doing any of those things. And Chuck's doing that. He's talking with people, you know, that are coming in. He's obviously talking to the crew, you know, between batters and stuff. It's just, his voice just, I don't think I've ever heard it close to going out. Not to jinx it or anything.
Does it ever break or anything?
Maybe a couple of times it has, but that's usually in an emotional situation, which
Right.
happens quite a bit nowadays. But no, I mean, I got to have a bag of peanuts at the ball game. I cannot work without a bag of peanuts.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way myself. There's not much that I gotta have, but peanuts and a soda will.
There you go.
I mean, you give me that, and I'm good with whatever else. So, how did you get into the radio game?
Well, I worked at a small station, and, you know, I was in radio and TV at Southern Illinois University, and that lasted about 3 months. I said, I'm not learning anything about radio here, radio TV. I know more than these guys do. I've already worked in radio, and I was lucky enough to had some relatives in Nashville that knew some people at WSM, and they said, hey, there's an opening. You want to do this? And by that, I'm at WSM by the time I'm 19.
But now, when was your first spin through radio? What was the first?
15.
15?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And did you know right away
No.
at that time that this is what you wanted to do?
It was something to make a little money to go to the drive-in on the weekends with a girl. And but I'm telling you, Mike, my focus, I played high school football, basketball, baseball. That was my focus.
You were going to play.
I was going to play. I thought, hey, I'm going to do something. And it just, you know, you reach a point where, you know, that's not going to work. And then let's try this radio thing.
All right, so you start to get serious about this radio thing. And what was your first actual stop? What was your first actual gig?
It was WDDD in Marion when I was 15.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did that.
That was where it started.
I did that through high school.
Did you have a regular shift there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On Sunday nights.
And did they let you play anything you wanted
Whatever
to?
I wanted to play. And, of course, I had the
You realize right now that makes you the envy of DJs everywhere, right?
Even at WSM was the same way. Because I was did the all-night trucking show. And we didn't, you know, we had the list of country hits at the time, but being where I was and the amount of area that we covered late at night on the Clear Channel, you know, I played pretty much what I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, Mike, a lot of people don't, I mean, you do, you'll understand this. I think Groobs will understand this. There was a time in the world when it meant something to get your record played on WSM for the first time.
Yes.
Because we covered, at night in the wintertime, we were 35 states. And it was still a big deal. And it was a big deal to come on there and talk about where I'm going to be, and here's my new record. And that was my radio show. I mean, the way I did that was similar to the way they did that in the 1940s and the 50s. It was old school Nashville radio where, hey, I got a new record, and I played acetates a lot. I played acetates of new songs by Barbara Mandrell or anybody like that, and it was a regular thing that whether you were at the Grand Ole Opry or not, you came by WSM and talked about where you were going to be, and here's my new record.
So now, how old were you when you got into WSM?
20.
20. How did that come about?
That came about with a Nolan air check of what I did. They needed somebody.
So you just sent an air check to WSM?
Yeah, and I had relatives that knew some people. Yeah. I had some relatives that knew some people.
Okay.
And there was a guy that was retiring by the name of Grant Turner. Grant started to work at WSM in the 1940s. He was a friend of Hank Williams and stuff like that. And I got to work with Grant a little bit at the Opry. But I did 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. I took Grant's place starting out. And I got to work with Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs for a little bit. They had a morning show on WSM that started at 5:45. And from 5:45 to 6:15, they came in and played live music for the entire Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs guys.
5:45 to 6:15? Just a 30-minute gig?
Brought to you by Martha White Cornmeal. And in between, I would read stock reports and farmer type stuff.
It's really weird because this sounds funny to me, yet at the same time, I do realize that is how things were back then. I mean, we didn't have a lot of that going on down here when I was a kid. I listened to the Mighty 1190 KLIF and loved that station and everything. And then over in Oak Cliff, we could pull in 1270 KFJZ out of Fort Worth pretty well. But I do remember, and have heard for years stories of this type of thing that you're talking about.
At WSM, at like 7 o'clock in the morning, they switched from hardcore country into a more middle-of-the-road type thing. That's where guys like Charlie Chase, Crook and Chase was on WSM. Pat Sajak did the afternoon drive. And Sajak did he would stop at 6 o'clock. There'd be an hour of news, and at 7 p.m., boom, it went hillbilly at 7 o'clock. And that
was full service, man.
Yeah, and that's what it was. And like in the mornings, morning drive at 9 o'clock, they had a show called The Waking Crew, which is a live band and sports guy, and I mean it was a regular morning show called The Waking Crew.
Was it? Were they yucking it up and having a good time and everything?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wow. It was
awesome.
It was real old school radio, and that's what I'm saying. If you watch like Coal Miner's Daughter, or there's an Elvis movie where you see some of it where you see the artist bringing a new record to the DJ to play.
Yeah,
I experienced a lot of that. I mean, and I would go to the Grand Ole Opry on Friday and Saturday nights and do my announcing. Well, then I'd run into, let's say, Charlie Louvin or the Louvin brothers, and he'd say, "Hey, I got a new record coming out. Can I come up next week?" Sure, yeah, come on by. Yeah, so that it was old school.
And the program directors or management or whoever just let you roll with that.
You know who my boss was?
Who?
Ralph Emery.
Oh, really?
And Ralph, he worked that same thing.
Yeah.
And that's just what it was. It was a huge studio. Mike, we left the door open. We'd let fans come in and sit there and watch us interview, country stars that would come by. It was really an old school thing, which eventually led to there being a studio in the Opryland Hotel, which is similar to what I've got at the ballpark now.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say Chuck's setup is so damn cool at Globe Life Field. Like he's always had people come through, at Arlington Stadium, the Temple, and all that. But having his own office with anybody can come by before and after a game, I didn't fully make the connection, but it makes total sense. You basically, from the start, have had people watching you or joining you while you're doing your job, pretty much from the beginning. Like it's just you've always had. Whether it's coworkers or just fans of the show, fans of the team, just you've always had that. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's turned you into a personality in your own right.
And I really enjoy that part of it. I mean, and you would too, because you're such a baseball fan. And what's really, having been there a long time, I get to hear from these folks that were kids at Arlington Stadium,
Oh,
and now
yeah.
they're bringing their kids by.
Yeah.
And I hear all these great stories. And this year, I mean, it was just this past year was just a constant parade of people going, I didn't think it would ever happen. Where were you? I'll say, where were you? And they'll tell me where they were when it happened. And it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really strange for me too, because over the years I've gotten a lot of that same thing, and now I think one of the coolest things is when somebody comes up to me and says, you got me into baseball, or I grew up listening to you, or something like that. That's cool, man.
You know, when somebody, and I'm similar, Mike, when somebody will come in and say, hey, I've been listening to you since I was 7 years old. You're the voice of my childhood. And there's some people that will get very emotional
Yes,
about it
there are.
because they may have went to that first ball game with their grandpa or their dad or their parents or whatever, and they say, you bring back some memories for me. So,
Yeah.
I can speak as someone that's got both of y'all as the voice of my childhood. I remember listening to Shoopy from about age 8 when the ticket started, and I wasn't fully into baseball yet, but driving around with my dad, listening to Diamond Talk, like, who are these old farts talking about the Rangers? But then a somewhat similar deal when as I started getting more into baseball, going to games with my dad and going to the Temple and realizing that obviously you kind of make the connection that, oh yeah, there is a person whose job is to announce the batters, to play the music, and realizing that for the Rangers it was the same guy, that you're the one announcing Juan Gonzalez and then playing the Imperial Death March as he's coming up, or, I always say another one bites the dust whenever Pudge would throw out a player, and just stuff like that. Like, both of y'all really did shape so much of my sensibilities, for better or worse, on, what I love about sports and humor and just all that. So as someone that does count both of y'all as a voice of my childhood, thank you.
Thanks, groups. Mike,
I love you, Shoopy.
Mike, in high school, in a small town radio station, I got to do play-by-play of all-star little league games and things like that on the radio. And I grew up listening to Harry Carey when he was with the Cardinals. This was before, he became like this, I guess, a buffoon on the air.
Yeah.
He was really good at baseball, and he and Jack Buck were just outstanding. And I really kicked myself sometime had I stayed in school instead of moving on and taking a right or left turn to country music, that I wanted to do play-by-play, but just didn't happen that way.
I loved both of those guys. I didn't become really familiar with Harry Carey until the superstation WGN got on cable, and before you know it, the Cubs were everywhere. He was everywhere, and that's when I first really caught on to Harry Carey. But Jack Buck, I've been familiar with him since 1960 because I don't know if anybody's going to remember this, but back then you had CBS, NBC, ABC, and all three of them had baseball. Usually It was CBS and NBC around here anyway. But that year, ABC got into baseball, and Jack Buck was the play-by-play guy. And really, he was kind of the first guy that I gravitated toward because, no knock on Kurt Gowdy, but he didn't do a whole lot for me. Dizzy Dean seemed kind of like more of a beer-drinking buffoon than anything else, but I do recognize the greatness of both of those guys. But the one that really showed me the way and how this should be done was Jack Buck. And I thought, number one, he had great pipes. His delivery was great. And he also did it with a little bit of a sense of humor, too.
Right. Right.
So let's back up here and take a little bit of a left turn and get into the Grand Ole Opry, because you were like MC of the Grand Ole Opry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How'd that come about?
Well, when you work at WSM, I mean, that's it's just kind of natural.
Yeah, I guess you're right outside the front door.
Well, you're up on the stage. Yeah, you're right. I mean, at the Opry, you're up on the stage. Yeah, I mean, the people that before me that worked those air shifts that I did were all announcers at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was kind of a prestigious thing at the time to be an announcer at the Opry. It still is. But, you know, and you worked portions. You worked like I'd work the Shoney's portion or the Coca-Cola portion. I was very fortunate to become very close friends with Marty Robbins because Marty would always work the 11:30 to midnight show.
Oh, the great Marty Robbins.
And the reason he did, and I was talking to these race car drivers from Indy last week about this, that Marty would request that 11:30 to midnight portion so he could go to the Nashville Speedway and race stock cars and then rush out to the Opry and sing El Paso. You know, I mean, it was really an easy thing, Mike. I mean, the only problem, it was every Friday and Saturday night. Christmas, New Year's, whatever.
All of it.
Every Friday and Saturday night. And then in the summertime, we'd have matinees at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoons. And I mean,
And you had to do all of that.
I do all that.
You had no backup, no nothing.
No backup. But there were there were two other guys involved at the time. And you just worked your portions. And when you weren't working a portion, you're going backstage and you're going from dressing room to dressing room to dressing room and just talking to people. And probably my favorite, and you'll like this one, my favorite backstage visit is Roy Acuff, the king of countrymen. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Roy Acuff and all of his Smoky Mountain Boys, the king of country music. And I got to work a lot of Roy's portions, which in turn I got to be around Minnie Pearl quite a bit because she always worked Roy's portion. But Roy was a big baseball fan. And because he was a big baseball fan, I went to Stan Musial's last game. My dad took me to Stan's last game in '63, and I kept my ticket stub. And I brought it to the Opry one night to show Roy Acuff, hey, I have Stan Musial's last game ticket stub. A couple of years later, he calls me and said, hey, you're working tonight, right? And I said, sure, I'm working. And he said, I want you to come by my dressing room. He said, I got somebody I want you to meet. And I said, oh, okay. He said, hey, bring that ticket stub with you. I said, okay. So that night I worked a couple of portions and I went backstage and went to Roy's dressing room. And as I turned the corner, there sits Stan the Man Musial. And Stan was, he played the harmonica. He was messing around on the harmonica and Roy was singing. It was pretty cool. And then I got to talk to Stan for about 15 minutes and, beat him up about, hey, what was it like doing this? What was it like doing that? And so Roy said, hey, you got that ticket stub with you? Show him that ticket stub. And I showed him the ticket stub, and he signed my ticket stub. And then I had to go back to work, and I said, Stan, I'm going back to work. He said, well, I'll be out there in a few minutes with Roy. And I said, great. And he said, hey, what's your address? I gave him my address. And about 2 weeks later, I got a Louisville Slugger, Stan the Man Musial, Louisville Slugger, and it said, to my greatest fan, Stan Musial. Most unbelievable.
Wow.
But there was always somebody backstage at the Opry that, passing through Nashville.
Yeah.
Like Dick Vitale was there one night. Got to meet Dick Vitale. I mean, any celebrity coming through Nashville. But anyway, it was an easy thing. You got out there, you read live commercials. You're on the radio. It's a radio show going on. And, you're introducing, here's Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton, and then they'd throw it over to you. I'd read about Martha White, Flour and Cornmeal, or Shoney's Big Boy or something like that.
Who was the biggest country music star you ever met, if you had to pick one?
Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Chet Atkins became a good friend of mine. And, Chet was behind the start of the Nashville sound, which, Mike, when I first got there, very young guy, and, I'm not sure I was accepted at first because they didn't believe the guy they heard on the air was the guy that they were talking to. But once Fair and Young accepted me, I felt like I was accepted in Nashville. But Chet would go out to dinner, and he would call and say, "Hey, is anybody up there?" And I say, "No." He said, "Well, I'm coming by. I got a friend of mine with me." I said, "Okay." And he one night he had Gordon Lightfoot with him.
Wow.
and that was pretty cool. But then Chet said, am I allowed to bring people here with new records and stuff? I said, sure. And so, I mean, that's when I first met Charlie Pride in like 1975 or so. And Charlie Pride says, hey, and Charlie Pride would get behind some young artists like Dave and Sugar at the time and he said, Charlie Pride, can I bring some artists by? I said, sure. So anyway, that's it just, and then you mentioned big names. Not a great thing to think about, but I was Marty Robbins' wife asked me to be a pallbearer at his funeral, and so I was. And in my limo was, as pallbearers, was Johnny Cash and Eddie Arnold, and I'm sitting there riding to the gravesite thinking, what am I doing in this limo?
That's pretty pinch me there.
But and they were all everybody was always nice, very nice to me. I didn't know if it was because I was playing their records or what, but like Chet had asked me one time, who's somebody you really want to talk to? And I said, well, how about Waylon Jennings? And he said, I don't know. Waylon's pretty tough about stuff like this. And then, so I guess Chet talked him into it one night, and Waylon and Jesse came by. And I mean, after that, Mike, Waylon, hey, we're out to dinner. Anybody up there? I'm coming by. And it was really cool.
See, all this speaks to you, though. All this speaks to the kind of guy you are. If they don't like you, they're not doing that.
It's similar to, and you can relate to this. It's similar to baseball players. Once they find out that you love the game and you know about the game, they accept you.
Yes, they do.
Same thing with Waylon Jennings. And Mike, my interview was like me and Waylon are at Waffle House having a cup of coffee and talking about things like,
Yeah.
So
you're just shooting the bull,
right,
as it were.
Exactly.
All right, so now how exactly does a guy with all this Nashville cred, all this incredible Grand Ole Opry cred, all of these connections, the ability to get anybody he wants on the phone at any time, day or night, the one guy that if they're passing through town, they're going to make sure they come to see. How does that guy make his way into baseball PA?
Well, I love baseball so much, and Nashville was getting a baseball team in 1978. And I was pretty good friends with the guy who got that ball rolling, and a guy named Larry Schmittou, who was the head baseball coach at Vanderbilt University. Mm-hmm. And Larry was also knew some of my friends, Conway Twitty, Jerry Reed, these guys who also were baseball fans who became owners of the Nashville Sounds. And when I first heard that Larry was getting this going, I called Larry and said, hey, who's going to be your PA guy? And I said, I can't be at every game, but man, I'd love to. I just want to be around baseball. So I became the PA guy for the Nashville Sounds, and we were first couple of years we were the Cincinnati Red affiliate, and then we became a Yankees affiliate. Mm-hmm. So I did the PA for Larry. And in winter of 82, Larry called me and said, hey, I'm going to Texas as the vice president of marketing for the Texas Rangers. I said, wow, that's cool. He says, yeah, and I'm gonna need a PA guy. And I said, Larry, you can't pay me to just be the PA guy. And he said, well, we'll work that out. And at the time, Mike, I had just won the CMA Disc Jockey of the Year award. It was a startup of the Nashville Network. I was doing we were turning these TV shows out like popcorn. I did Stars of the Grand Ole Opry. I did a show with a country group called Riders in the Sky.
You're on Hee-Haw.
Exactly. made 4 appearances on Hee Haw, which is a whole other story you want to hear in a minute. Anyway, I had all this stuff going, and at that time, my radio show had, in June of that year, we had gone nationwide on a nationwide network. So it was no longer WSM, it was the Music Country Network. We were on 100+ stations via satellite, and it was me and Larry King. Larry King talked politics, and I talked country music. So I had this network thing going. And I first turned Larry down. And I said, Larry, I got so much going here. I said, I don't know. Because I figured I'd watched other people at WSM, like a guy like Grant Turner, who's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Was at WSM all of his life. And I figured I'll be here the rest of my life. After a couple of weeks, I got to thinking, okay, wait a minute. I've never had a vacation. I've got a young family. I'm working all the time. There were some days, Mike, especially when the Nashville network was cranking up, I'd go to work at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't be back home till 4 a.m. the next day because it's just constant. And then the Opry on the weekends. Mm-hmm. I thought, what about baseball? I love baseball and some major leagues. And so I called Larry back after calling. I said, hey, I'll take a look at it. So I flew out here like in February, maybe January of '83, and I fell in love with Arlington Stadium, that old scoreboard with the big Texas in left field, and everybody. A lot of people, complain about Arlington Stadium, but I loved Arlington Stadium.
Yeah, myself included. I'm one of those.
I thought it was a great place to watch a game, and so, but I kept telling Larry, hey, I can't come down here just as the PA guy. And he said, I know. He said, you're going to be my director of sales. So I was the director of sales and did the PA and scoreboard stuff on the side. So that's how Larry Schmittou was the guy who got me down here.
I was thinking about this earlier today, and you've been doing this for so long that I don't recall who did it before you. I can't think of anything about the Rangers PA scene before you. Can't think of who it was, any kind of name, what it sounded like, anything like that.
I think there's a guy you probably know, Bill Melton. You know Bill Melton, don't you?
I know the name.
Yeah, he did the PA before me. And I think it's much like what, I tell guys today that ask, hey, I want to do what you do. And I go, okay, but I want you to understand you're not going to make a living just as the public address announcer. It's just, I said, most clubs hire a local radio guy that can talk about being at the ballpark to do the PA. And you're just not going to make a living doing that. And that's why, I'm involved in promotions. I'm involved in the scoreboard production, things like that. So it just doesn't make sense.
So here you are. You come down here to a place that I'm thinking you didn't know a whole lot about. You're here because Larry Schmittou brought you here. Larry Schmittou thought this would be something good for you. You don't know anything about it. You don't know anything about the situation. Do you know anything about the ball club?
Yeah, because, I don't know if you remember, even back in those days, the USA Network had a Thursday night game of the week.
They did.
And the Rangers appeared on that several times.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with Buddy Bell, Jim Sundberg. I mean, I was a baseball, I'm working at the Opry and stuff. Man, I'm still a baseball fan. Yeah. I'm still following baseball close.
What'd you know about the area? The Dallas-Fort Worth area?
Other than it was a lot bigger than Nashville. And and I knew Bill Mack. Bill Mack was my competition at night, him and Charlie Douglas at WWL New Orleans. But I knew Bill Mack. I listened to Bill Mack. And I listened to Ranger Baseball because you could get WBAP in Nashville. So I listened to Mark Holtz and Eric Nadel doing Ranger games when I would either driving home or driving to work. But so I didn't know a whole lot other than that.
Not a whole lot about the area or the lay of the land around here or what the people are like or anything.
No. I figured
diving into a cold pool, huh?
Right. I figured being where I was from, and then having lived in Nashville for 10 years, that I would be okay in Texas. And I'd heard nothing but good things about Texas.
Now, another thing that is really cool about you is it's very unusual for a PA guy, I think anyway. Now, maybe you disagree with this, but I think it's pretty unusual for somebody who does what you do to build the type of rapport with the fan base that you have over the years, to the point where, now you're in a booth that backs up to the main concourse out there. People can walk by, they can look in on you. You turn around every now and then, you wave at them. I don't know, you may invite them in, whatever, But I mean, you've always been a really easy guy to talk to at everything. But this type of accessibility is kind of next level.
Well, I think it's because of what I did in Nashville and being able to interview people. Again, my interviews, the Waffle House over a cup of coffee. There were a lot of things that when a player would go out to speak back in those days, I would go with them because I was able to interview them.
Yeah.
And then the fans began to see me doing things like that, and I did some things with I did Fan Fest, which I shook a lot of hands at Fan Fest over the years. Just things like that. I went to a lot of schools. I've been to probably every school in Dallas-Fort Worth as a guest speaker or a career day or something like that. And that's, I think that's, I've always enjoyed talking to fans and talking baseball.
Can I ask a quick question? So you've mentioned a couple of times with your office at the stadium. How much input did you have in it? Because you made a comment about it kind of being like it was at the Grand Ole Opry, and you do have a ton of access to actually sit in there and be able to watch you from outside, and people come up to meet you. So how much input and say did you get in your space?
Not so much input as when the architects talked to me about spaces. They really didn't talk to me about spaces because I needed a scoreboard room also, but they interviewed me more about my early memories of public address announcers, and I told them about Charlie Jones when I was first going to Cardinal games at Sportsman's Park, Busch Stadium 1, whatever you want to call it. I looked down on the field. Charlie Jones was right behind home plate down on the field, and I asked my dad, why is he down there? And he said, well, he started working for the Cardinals before they electrified the PA system, so he was on the field and would step on the field with a megaphone. And once they electrified the system, they just left him behind home plate. So I told the architects that. And then one of the architects was familiar with the radio. The last couple of years I was in Nashville, the studio was in the Opryland Hotel. We did shows out of the hotel, and people staying in the hotel would walk by, and if I was interviewing Barbara Mandrell or something, they would watch us talk. And then we had it set up later where they could ask questions while we were on the air, so it was a pretty good, nice setup. So they took what I had told them about Charlie Jones, and then they approached me and said, hey, how do you feel about being on the main concourse where the fans can come in and talk and they can see you through? I said, if it's okay with everybody else, it's okay with me. And so, and you know what? It's been okay with everybody except my wife. So she can't stand to be in there eating a hot dog and they're watching me eat. And then she went to the bathroom one night. I have a local bathroom there, and
so you got your little own bathroom.
Oh yeah, which is a great thing because I only have a minute 30.
Yeah,
I can't put on Stairway to Heaven. Go to the bathroom. But anyway, she came out of the bathroom one night, and there's about 50 people out there waving at her, and she says, I'm out. I can't do this. So.
It is amazing how you were able to do, before Globe Life Field, you were also doing the music, you were running the soundboard also doing video stuff too for a good chunk of that time. The fact that you ever had any time to concentrate on anything or take a bathroom break still fascinates me. And, you know, I, for a few years, got to just do the music, and knowing how crazy that could get, the way that you were able to balance all those different plates still fascinates me.
And, you know, Mike, what Group says there, I look back at that now. I probably was not fair to the fans' experience by doing everything like that, because, you know, sometimes I might be looking for a piece of music. Sometimes I might be looking for PA copy. And I'm trying to make sure the soundboard's okay. So,
yeah.
And then at the same time, I'm watching what the guys are doing on the video board. So I probably wasn't fair to the fans. And when Groups came along, it was a big help, and it helped me a lot. But
That's
was
what
an old,
Shoopy does.
But I was an old, an old radio guy plus an old minor league guy working for Schmitto. You know, Larry believed that, hey, you work during the day, you're also going to work the games, and it was an old minor league philosophy. Wear a lot of hats.
Has any player ever been perturbed by the way you announced him, or any sponsor?
No, nobody's said anything. Nobody's ever. The only time anybody really got perturbed at me over the years was Rick Helling, and I look back on it, he was right. I reacted as a fan one night when Darren Oliver gave up a home run to Cal Ripken, and I hit the natural because it was Cal's last visit.
Yeah.
And I became a fan, and I shouldn't have been. And Rick called me, and I went and apologized to Darren Oliver. And Darren was cool about it. He said, I didn't think anything about it. He said, you know, I'm so focused on the game. If I had fireworks went off in my pocket, in my back pocket, he said I wouldn't even notice it. So Cal liked it. I've talked to Cal since then. He thought it was cool. But that's the only time I've ever had any type of confrontation from a player at all.
I think that's the second time Rick Helling's
bad.
been brought up this week in the last
I think
3
so.
episodes.
Yeah, I think we brought up Rick Helling at a remote last Friday with me, Shoopy, and Grego talking about their experience with Pete Stein, if you remember that from years ago with the countdown and everything. We believe that it all started with a discussion about Rick Helling and his place in the rotation. But I was going to say...
I'm not proud of myself for that.
Yeah, he still kicks himself about it, but we still love the drop, the countdown. I was going to say I can think of one sponsor, maybe not a confrontation or anything, but what was it, Miss Baird's bread story?
Yeah, that's one
Way
night.
to go, Shoopy.
No, it's not bad. I mean, it's pretty dumb, Mike. I mean, I gave away dinner for two at Mrs. Baird's Bread as a prize one night. You know, and that's he's got a point. I mean, if you don't have your PA copy with you, then you're trying to think what I'm supposed to say right here. And I said dinner for two at Mrs. Baird's Bread. You know, the other time, one of the most embarrassing moments was. And at this time I had the cassette cartridges, broadcast cartridges you put in the tape machines, and I'm looking for a piece of music. Pete Incavilla's up to bat, and I hear the slap of the bat on the ball, and I wheeled around and went, number 19, Juan Gonzalez. It was a foul ball. Inky was still up. And the game stopped for a minute, and Inky's looking up there, doing like that. And I went, correction, Pete Incavilla's still hitting. I mean, I'd have been much better off not to say anything. But.
And I think that reminds me of something we were talking about before we went on, was the Gino Petralli thing. I guess it's not really an error, but moments where it's a good thing that you have control over your own microphone and have generally been pretty error-free with it.
I'm a fan, and I'm as big a Ranger fan as anybody, and I question manager moves and things like that. So, I mean, sometimes if I'd had my foot pedal open, I wouldn't be here today.
How did you invent the dot race?
You know, in Nashville, we'd had a race on a black and white matrix scoreboard, and two two lights chased each other. There was an A light and a B light, and they chased each other across the scoreboard. And I had remembered that when we got the video board, I thought, I wonder what we can do with this thing. And then Jim Reeves had been to Oklahoma City, and he saw something similar of the two lights chasing each other across Oklahoma City scoreboard. He said, you ought to come up with something with that video board. At the time, I was selling sponsorships, and was trying to sell Whataburger, and that's why I came up with the dot race, is I was trying to sell a sponsorship to Whataburger. And it took me about a month or so to work something out to where it made sense on the video board, and we had a character generator, and it only had 8 colors, and I just picked red, blue, and yellow was originally. And this is an interesting story, Mike, because the ad agency at the time of Whataburger, we printed dots that fans received, and if you had that dot, you'd take it to Whataburger, get a free soft drink. Well, they printed, we're on Easter weekend, we're opening on Monday, and they printed the wrong color dot. They printed green. And all the races were going to be red, blue, yellow.
Yep.
And the guy called me and said, hey, we've got the red, blue, and green dots. I said, whoa, we got a yellow dot. He said, we printed green. And he said, I said, well, we can't change. I said, we're all set here. And he goes, you got to help me out here. You got to do something. So I said, okay. And I thought about it, called him back in an hour, and I said, I'll tell you what we can do. What we'll do on Monday night is the yellow dot will go down, and an ambulance will come out and pick him up and haul him off, and green comes on. So that's why we have red, blue, and green now. So that's... But no, it was just...
That's an amazing story.
And here's the thing, Mike. That character generator back in those days would take about an hour and a half a day to make a cartoon of these dots racing, do the 3 laps.
Yeah.
And
today it probably takes about 3 minutes.
And I was such a...
3 seconds.
I'm such a stickler. I would do a different race every day because my philosophy was, guy pays his money to get in, gets a different race every night. So I never did rerun any races like that. But that's how that came up. Sell a sponsorship.
So Groobs and Shoopy and maybe one other person from the Sunset Lounge all need to be the dots now. Yeah.
We can arrange that.
I want to see them running as the dots.
We can arrange that.
Let's do it.
Coming soon.
Sunset Lounge dot race.
Yes.
It seems like inside the organization, and this is looking at it from afar, maybe it's not this way, but it seems to me that between tenure and excellence of work over the entirety of that tenure, how into it you are, how much of a part of the fabric of the organization that you are, that you operate with, probably a little bit more input into what goes on than some who do that job might, and maybe even a certain amount of autonomy.
There's a couple of people there like that. John Blake, it's having the...
John Blake, who, by the way, is coming to sit in that chair next week.
And he's I don't do anything unless I talk to John Blake first.
I can't wait.
So if anything, whether it's something on the video board or whatever, ceremonies, I always I go to John, what do you think about this? So, yeah, there's several people up there like that.
How many consecutive games are you at now?
3,325.
Oh, gosh. Wow. Literally has not missed a game since 1983.
What's the record?
That is the record. That's for consecutive games. Now, there's a guy in Philadelphia that has more years.
Okay.
Dan Baker. He's got 50 years.
Do you guys all know each other? All you PA guys?
I've met Dan one time, yeah. And I met...
Do you know most of the other guys?
I met Roy Steele, the guy you like so much in Oakland. I never met Dick Callahan, who replaced Roy Steele. I do know Amelia Schimmel, who replaced Dick Callahan.
Yeah. I think it was Dick Callahan, the one that I liked.
Okay.
But yeah, that was one of the neatest things about visiting the Coliseum, which, by the way, is not that bad of a place for baseball. I mean, it gets a really bad rap, and nobody's ever there or anything like that.
The Oakland Coliseum?
Yeah, the Oakland Coliseum.
When was the last time you went?
It's been a few years.
That's probably why you're saying that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's like in the last.
I don't think it's been good for a while.
It was much better before they put Mount Davis up.
Yeah, it was. But even
Davis.
Even with Mount Davis, it's kind of funky and kind of weird, just kind of a real oddball vibe to it and everything. But
oh, he liked it because it was weird. It makes so much sense now.
all in all, it's not a bad place. I thought it was not a bad place for baseball. But
as long as I can
now, because there's not going to be baseball.
As long as I can sit wherever I want, I mean, it's not a bad place for baseball. But if I got to pay for a ticket and sit up in 300, no way in hell am I sitting there for baseball.
I liked hearing the great Dick Callahan because I always like PA guys.
I know Bob Ford at Houston.
Yep.
Yeah, we hear Bob Ford on commercials around here all the time. So,
well, there's one PA guy I like better than any of them. And that is you.
We love Chuck.
We love Chuck.
I appreciate that.
There is nobody like Chuck. And if you'd like to see the scene that Chuck works in, drop by.
Yeah,
drop
right
by.
behind home plate.
Yeah.
I open up before the game, before I have to start working, and then and I stay after the game. The last person leaves.
So is all the stuff in the display cases? Is that all your stuff? Oh, hello, Ponyo.
It is all my stuff.
Okay, so we took my niece for her first game ever a couple of months ago, and she's 1, but she loved looking at your stuff. Like, she literally sat there just staring at the display cases when we went by your office, because we did a tour beforehand with Rev, and it was just really cool. She loved it. It was so awesome. But when we were looking at it, I was like, damn, like, you have to have some really great appreciation for baseball and that kind of stuff to understand just the holy shit that's in there.
You know where they got the idea for that? When we were in the World Series in 2011, down in the tunnels at Busch Stadium 3, there was a guy named, I think it was Marty Frederick, I think that was his name. He was the promotion guy for the Cardinals for a long time, and they had a display case with everything that he had something to do with promotion-wise, and that's where I think Rob Matwick, who works for us, had said, we ought to put a display case up of Chuck's stuff. So that's what happened. That's how that came about.
What's the one thing in there that, like, if house fire's about to happen, what do you save?
What's the most important thing?
What's the most important thing in there?
Probably the boots that Nolan Ryan gave me as a gift. That's something, Mike. I'll tell you a story here. But when Nolan first came to the Rangers in 1989, he's one of those guys that doesn't want to go out and speak by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I got elected to go with Nolan a few times, and then when he became the team president, since that time we did 150, couple of hundred things together. Probably the most special one was one day he calls me and says, "Hey, we got another dog and pony show." And I was, okay, where are we going? He goes, "We're going to Midland, Texas League All-Star Dinner." And I said, okay, when's the flight? He says, "We're driving." I said, okay. So in the car, 5 hours with Nolan there, 5 hours back. To sit with him, and coming back was what was great. It was a dark Texas night. We got a game on the radio, Angels and A's, talking baseball with one of the greatest pitchers of all time. So,
God, I can't imagine.
But then the icing on the cake was on my 60th birthday. My wife gave me this box of notes and letters from people from Nashville, Grand Ole Opry people, Marty Robbins' family, that wrote letters about me. It's like having your funeral and everybody's talking about you, and you're reading these letters. And I got one from Nolan, and he said, he enjoyed working with me, and he said, "But I tell you what, one of my favorite nights in my life was driving back with you from Midland, talking baseball." I thought, whoa. But that's
strong, man. That is strong.
But and anytime he and I would go out, it was always pretty cool that we'd get in the car after a lunch in Tyler or something, and well, I'll tell you what, if you can find a Dairy Queen, I'm buying ice cream. I said, okay. So.
I'm going to say one more note on Nolan. I believe, is it the big table in your booth?
That's right.
Is Nolan's old table?
Not only the table, I got his negotiating table, which is actually the table that he and I were sitting at, and I was going over some promotion ideas with him. I said, and right here, Nolan, we're going to give away snow monkeys. What do you mean snow monkeys? I said, well, we're going to give away snow monkeys. Well, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. And it was obviously stuffed snow monkeys.
Yeah.
But that time, I also have his desk. I've got his desk.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've still got my snow monkey somewhere.
Well, you're an amazing cat.
I appreciate that.
You really are an amazing cat. And I mean, for all of us, myself included, of all the things that are symbolic of Rangers baseball, you are at least near, if not at, the top of that list. You've been a part of it for so long that you have provided the backdrop and the soundtrack for Ranger baseball for so many over the years. And I know everybody appreciates it. I appreciate it too.
Well, I love the game, and I love Dallas-Fort Worth. And people always ask me if I, in fact, Ray Davis, one of our owners, asked me the other day, he said, you ever think much about Nashville? And I said, nah, Ray, not anymore. I said, I love this game so much. I love the Rangers. And I'm so happy that guys like you and the people of this area got to experience what we got to experience last year, because it just does not get much better than that.
I can't imagine it. I mean, I tell everybody now that was the greatest night of my sports life, and it will never be topped.
If you got time, I got a quick story to tell you.
Oh, I got
Hell yeah.
We got this is a podcast. We got time.
This was my greatest decision. Of all the things that I've ever done, one of the greatest decisions of my life, first of all, was for John Blake to ask me to MC the World Series celebration. I thought, whoa, I'm a baseball fan, and I'm getting to do this. So I'm up there, and he gave me a list of guys that I was supposed to interview. So I interviewed Evaldi and Simeon, and I forget who else it was. But the last one I was supposed to interview was Corey Seager. So I introduced Corey, and he didn't allow me to get to where I was ready to ask him a question. He grabbed the mic, and he started talking. And as he started talking, I thought, okay, I know where he's going. And you've got that T-shirt on today. I know where he's going. I know where he's going with this. And I got to thinking, okay, if I grab the mic, now, I will be the biggest sports idiot in the world's history. Because that's what he said. He said, I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, I think I
and if I would imagine me coming back with a microphone, Corey, what did you think about that victory? Or whatever, some softball question. I'd have looked like the biggest idiot. And I thought, okay, mic drop. It's all, hey, we've had a great time. How about another hand for the world champion Texas Rangers? Because there's no way any interview could have topped that.
See, that's another way in which you are greatness. You know how to read the room. Anybody that's good at what they do knows how to read the room.
Sometimes you got to know when to shut up.
That's
exactly.
Right, you do. What kind of consecutive game streak have you got going?
3,325. So, I don't know how long that's going to go. I'm guess one day, Mike, two things could happen. Either they take me out of there in a box, just roll me on out of there, or
we put you in the display case.
They'll freeze me and put me in the display case, or maybe just put my head in there or something.
At least your throat.
Yeah. Or when I start messing up names and numbers, nobody's going to have to tell me. Although somebody says, "Hey, you're making a lot of mistakes," hey, okay, I'm done. So,
do you have a backup?
No, right now it would have been John Blake. There's never been a situation, so John would have been that. So
Can I be that guy?
Yeah, we can work that out.
I would love that.
Nice.
We can work that out.
Man, I cannot thank you enough for doing this.
I'm glad to do it.
I mean, you're a guy that I've gotten to know over the years, and you know, we're both great fans of the great game, and it's just really, really cool to get you in here and hear your stories and talk about you, and even work in the great Marty Robbins, who I love.
Well, respect and the respect and the feelings go both ways, because working up there in the control room for years and years, and the entertainment that you and groups provided, and the hammer just made the day go by. Let's not forget him. Yeah, made the day go by a lot faster.
All right, that is a great Chuck Morgan. Thanks to him. Thanks to Shoopy, Mickey, Ashley, Beckham, all the rest, but most of all, thanks to you for watching. This has been your Dark Companion.
All right. I'm going to go take my pants off.
Your Dark Companion is a Stolen Water Media presentation.